I ended up meeting someone when I was in university at a nightclub I used to work at. I actually was waiting tables for people like Nas, the English football team. There's this guy who was like 24 years old, and he spent $15,000 on champagne. And I was just like, so I'm like, what do you do? He's like, I'm in sales. I'm like, what the hell do you sell? If you're asking me more personally, there was one particular experience with my dad that I had, who's no longer alive. He passed away when I was a teenager. Yeah. The relationship, sadly, wasn't good when he passed. But it's kind of one of those where I think...
Do you feel like you've changed? Entrepreneurship has changed you?
It's not about the money anymore. I've always believed that for some reason we're going to pull it off. It was actually Hannah who got me into entrepreneurship as a concept. We had no idea about nothing. So we entered that competition just as something fun to do on the weekend, and then we won. Where we were just like, wait, hold on. We can probably do something in technology and healthcare. So
tell me a little bit about the problem that you were trying to solve.
So what we essentially saw was two things. One...
David, thank you for making it.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit about... One question that I like to ask people is, what is the key events that when you look back, at the younger David, you're like, these things, now I see why I had to go through them for me to become the entrepreneur that I am today, or the man that I am today. What are those key events?
So there's a few that come to mind. Some are a little bit more emotive than others. So I'll start with the more sort of classic business response to that. When I realized entrepreneurship was for me, it was when I was working in consulting. I was working for a legal services company that provided alternative legal services to Fortune 500 companies, so banks, pharmaceutical companies. And I joined that company because I wanted to learn how to sell big ticket deals. I saw in the newspaper that they sold a $75 million contract to Credit Suisse. And I was just like, I don't know who these guys are, but I want to learn how to sell a $75 million deal. Because I thought, actually, tying back to an earlier point, I ended up meeting someone when I was in university who was at a nightclub I used to work at. And in this nightclub, I managed to meet a whole bunch of cool people. So I actually was waiting tables for people like Nas, the English football team, who ended up taking me out on a night out, which is like a crazy story because they really liked me when they were drunk. But anyway, there's this guy who was like 24 years old, and he spent $15,000 on champagne. And anyway, I was like to him, dude, what do you do? You're so young, you have so much money, and you paid with a credit card, so you're clearly not doing crime or anything like that. So I was like, what do you do? He's like, I'm in sales. I'm like, what the hell do you sell? He's like, I sell big contracts. And he was in defense contracts, and he sold $1 billion contract or something to some government. And he got paid his commission, which was a few $1 million. Yeah. And I was just like, you can get paid a few $1 million for selling one thing?
Yeah.
So I think that was probably a very formative experience. So I was studying genetics at the time, and I remember thinking, I'm smart, but there's this guy, and I met him, he was a couple of years older than me. And then he was saying he doesn't even have a degree, and he was born and raised like 10 minutes away from where I lived growing up. So I remember thinking just like, who's the smart one? I'm the one doing a really complex STEM degree.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting tables, paying for this guy who didn't finish school. And he's got a multi-million dollar contract. So then I remember thinking after that moment, I need to get into sales. And then after that, I went into sales, got some experience, and then fast forward to seeing that $75 million contract. I remember in the sales job I was in, I knew I could make a good living, like be on 6 figures, potentially have one or two houses, but I knew I could never become rich as a salesperson in that job. So knowing what was possible based on that guy before, I was like, okay, I need to find out how to sell big ticket contracts. I saw in the newspaper, the company I ended up working for had the $75 million contract to Credit Suisse. I was like, I need to join them. Then I joined, and what I noticed is it was more about process management rather than actual wheeler dealer. They said one thing that managed to get a $75 million signature. And then once I realized that, I wanted to be involved. And then a few people in senior management were super supportive and really tried to push me to the next level. But I had one particular person who was a blocker for me, and it felt like they didn't like seeing me succeed. So at every opportunity, they would just stop my contribution to the big deals. And I remember just thinking, you know what? I don't like having to ask permission to do something that I know I'm capable of doing. And that thought came and stuck. And then I guess that rebellious streak was triggered, and that eventually led to entrepreneurship. So that's kind of the business into that question. Yeah. If you're asking more personally, there was one particular experience with my dad that I had, who's no longer alive. He passed away when I was a teenager. But it was an event which kind of ruined our relationship right up until he passed away. That made sense to me last year, fairly recently. And he passed away when I was 19. And it's at 30 years old, I got a realization as to, oh, wait, this is that piece of rebelliousness that he implanted in me, where I wanted self-determination. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to go into entrepreneurship. And I think without that seed, I wouldn't be here today. But essentially, it's quite a long story, but I'll give you a short version of it. I was 12 going on 13, or 13 going on 14. And I wanted a particular pair of trainers. And I was just like, I love these trainers. They're the best things ever. They were Timberland trainers, white. I remember the model when they first came out. And all the rappers were wearing them, and I was just, I got a poster over it, and I was like, every time my dad was around, I was like, these ones, I've left these coming up, these trainers, have a look at these. So anyway, I was just like giving them so many hints. I was like, okay, I'm going to get these for my birthday. So anyway, my birthday rolls around, and I'm like, okay, I wonder when dad's going to come home, and I wonder when I'm going to get this present. He comes home, and he's wearing new trainers, and he says, hey, David, look at these. And these are the exact trainers that I'd been showing him about, but he's wearing them. Yeah. So he decides to walk around the house and one of these trainers. So I'm like, oh yeah, he's like, you like them? I'm like, yeah, of course I like them. I showed you so many times. Right? I really love those trainers. And then he's like, yeah. And then after a while, probably about after an hour, I was just like, okay, this joker's gone long enough. Where's my pair? So I go out to him.
You got two.
Where's my pair? And he goes, what do you mean? I was like, those are trainers I wanted. It's my birthday today. Where are they? And he's like, there are none. And then he goes to me, do you know why I got them? I was like, no, why? He's like, because I have a job. I have my own money. So I bought them. And then he just left. And at the time, I was like, why did you do that? Like, why was you stunned on your own child on their birthday? And he just ruined the whole day. I ended up crying to my mom about it. She wanted to buy me alternative trainers. I was like, nah, I don't want it. It felt like such a personal attack.
Yeah.
But I think after that experience, I remember thinking, I'm going to have my own money and no one's going to tell me what I can do with it or what I can't do. And then I guess the realization that I had last year was that's life. Like, if you don't have your own life sorted, you have no say on what happens. And someone was going to take what you want and there's nothing you can do about it. You're completely powerless. And it's like that feeling of powerlessness that I had just gave me this thing of I can't be powerless for a long period of time. If I'm learning a skill, fair enough. But I need to be looking at the next step. I need to be looking at pushing forward. So that's the one which I think is the core of everything, because that thought made me dissatisfied with my current state and always looking to push, always looking to do more and to build more. And I think it's a shame because I realized that as an adult after he passed away, and the relationship, sadly wasn't good when he passed. But it's kind of one of those where I think that's now I'm an adult. I can see it was a gift that I was given, where for a long period of my life, that was a chip on my shoulder that I had, and just like, no one's going to stand on me like that again. No one's going to make me feel so helpless and powerless again.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's carried through. And I only realized when I was talking to my co-founder, Hanan, and I was like, dude, I don't even know why I'm so driven. I don't know why I want to do this. And Hanan's known me since we were 5 years old. He lived down the street from me as a kid. We ended up going to the same school right through university. And then when I was working, he was like 10 minutes away. So we've always like been around each other for a long period of time. But he was like, dude, I can't believe you forgot. It's like after your dad did that with his readers. And I was like, really? It's like after that, you're just different. You were just hungry. You never really went back. So I was like, oh, that was a nice gift he gave me, but I didn't realize at the time.
Yeah. How do you think Hanan, your co-founder, would describe you in 3 words?
How would he describe me in 3 words? I'd say he would probably say I'm resilient.
And why is that?
I'd say he would say that about me because whenever we have challenging situations, I always look at it like we may end up getting a knock out of the situation, but let's go forward anyway. And I think that the faith that like as long as it doesn't knock you out the game, we can take knocks. That's been a mentality we actually had on the playground when we used to get bullied together. So there's this big kid who was like 2 years older than us that used to beat us up every single lunchtime. And it was me, Hanan, and one other friend who's also called David. It was the 3 of us. And this kid would not stop picking on us. And we'd be like, every time before break time, I'd be like, let's strategize how we're gonna do this. This time, us 2 run this way, you run this way, and we try jumping from this side or whatever. And we lose every time and end up crying. But it's not like I didn't want, even though I knew every day we were going to get beaten up, I didn't want us to just take it lying down. And I think after having that sort of mentality as young kids and then kind of carrying that through life, I think that's probably where the resilient word would come from if he was to describe me. But I can check with him if that would be the word that comes to his mind. What other word would he describe me as? I'd say loyal, and I'd say that's another thing where for me, I've kept the same friends pretty much all my life because in my mind, I only really have 2 categories. I have family and I have acquaintances. And it's like, once you're a friend, you're my friend. And I treat you the same way I treat any of my brothers. And I have a very big family, loads of brothers. I've got 7 brothers, 2 sisters. So very much like a tribe mentality. Yeah. And if you want to like my close friends, then like there's no length I wouldn't go for them. And I think it's during the tough times where that really shows. Like, and I think any of my close friends know if they call me in a situation of crisis, I will figure out a way to be there or a way to help or do whatever I can. I think that's been, I'd be fortunate enough to have friends who also share that mentality as well. So you would have met me and like these guys, I can trust them with anything. And I think it's because we have that level of loyalty where they can have my bank cards, my PIN, my passport, anything. Like he's even got to the point where when I'm coming to Rwanda or whatever, somebody could be like, oh, David, I want you to bring something to the UK, and then someone comes to deliver it. It's in my bag. I don't even check what it is. I'm just like, it's in my bag. Word. And jumping. And I have that faith where they wouldn't put me in a tough situation, or so I don't even need to worry about things like that. And then, so I'd say,
has it ever backfired?
No, with my close friends. No, and I think it's because they know me, and I'd rather take a bullet than betray one of my friends. And they have the same mentality around me. It's like, the worst thing I can think of is if I look in the mirror and I see that I betrayed my friend. Even and this is a separate story, but the first woman I was in love with, she put me in a situation where I had to choose between her and my friend, and I was madly in love. I was just like, I cannot look myself in the mirror if I betray my friends. She's gotta go. And I was crying every day for 6 months, every night before bed, crying for 6 months. And I was like, I gotta firm it. I just gotta write it out. But it's like, and I remember we had a conversation about that, and he was just like, bro, I know how much you love that girl. Like, I respect you so much for, staying loyal. And I'm like, I couldn't look at myself. I couldn't look in the mirror if I betrayed my friend. So loyal would probably be a second one. And then third, I'd say optimistic, probably, because, I guess throughout my life, the life of Hanan and I, like, I've always believed that for some reason we're going to pull it off. No matter what the odds are, I'm just like, yeah, the odds may say this, but we'll figure it out. So when it was actually Hanan who got me into entrepreneurship as a concept in and of itself, when I was just venting at him, just like, I can't believe I have to work a corporate career. I have to, like, basically, like, kill my ambition so that I can get permission to go senior enough in an organization with like 10 years experience where I can actually start doing things that I know I'm capable of doing now. And then he started just talking about, well, have you looked at startups and entrepreneurship? And I was like, what are startups? And he was like, oh, Facebook and Google. I knew of them as companies, but I had no idea about the stories. Yeah. He was the one that kind of brought me in on that side and just said, look, this is an actual proven way to build wealth in terms of technology. So once he kind of planted that seed in my head, I was just like, okay, that's an option. But I never really looked at it as one until we had our encountering of the situation where we thought, oh, we have a unique insight, we have unique experience, and we're optimistic and crazy enough to be like, yeah, we're going to do it. And I think for me, I guess the optimism coupled with the resilience just means I genuinely believe it's always just a matter of time. I don't mind how many times I get knocked. I know that if I keep going at it with the same level of enthusiasm each time, I'll eventually figure it out. As long as I am humble enough to take feedback from whatever knock I've gotten, then I'll be better equipped the next time. So yeah, those are the three.
And how did you get into entrepreneurship? I mean, you just briefly talked about it, but what job were you doing at the time?
Yeah.
And what was the insight that you got?
Yeah, so I guess my first career out of uni was I worked for a consulting company. I did business development, so sales in a B2B setting. So my clients were...
But you studied something in the...
I studied something in genetics, and then I went into selling to a pharmaceutical company. So it felt like a natural transition. Yeah. I was still surrounded by nerds because and I hope no pharmaceutical executive is offended by my observation because I'm a self-professed nerd as well. But it's like everyone who's in healthcare is nerdy to some degree. They're all intelligent enough where they could have been in banking or private equity or whatever, but they want to do something in healthcare and then they kind of pursue that path. So for me, it always felt natural speaking to pharmaceutical execs because they're super particular about their craft and their field. So I went into that. I then wanted to go into where the money is at. And then I saw the legal services company make that big contract. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll learn how to sell big contracts to big companies. And so I moved there, did that for a few years. And then it was actually, funny enough, an M-Pharma sponsored hackathon that Hanan and I went to, where we were just like, wait, hold on. We can probably do something in technology and healthcare. So M-Pharma, this was back in 2018. So they just raised the first $10 million or $5 million or something like that. It was really early on. And they were having an issue around their inventory management at the time. And they put a hackathon for the African the African Healthcare Hackathon in London. And so their co-founder, Dan, who's like their chief product officer, he was running this hackathon, and he thought maybe some university students or whatever would have some good ideas about how to solve this inventory management problem. So we entered that competition just as something fun to do on a weekend, and then we won. And when he was talking about the problems that M-Pharma were having, and then we learned, wait, this company is raising money. They're like working in the space. They've got like some good people behind them. There's actually like
stuff is happening.
Yeah, stuff was happening in healthcare. And we were just like, okay, well, we won, and that kind of some form of validation. Let's just keep working on this problem and see if it has any legs. And then Capsule ended up doing a spin-off from that. So I always say Capsule wouldn't exist if it wasn't for M-Pharma.
What was winning? What did that entail? Like you win prize, or like what was the?
Yeah, so we did win a prize. They gave introduction to investors, which we absolutely bombed the meetings because we were literally this kid, guys in the corporate world, showing up to VC. We had no idea about nothing. We didn't know what a cap table was. We didn't know how you learn funding. All we did for preparations for that meeting was read 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and just looked at his journey of how they raised off a napkin and stuff like that. Oh, they're income. Great. So walking through me, I'm like, oh yeah, we just won this competition for M-Pharma where they said that they'll pilot our we didn't even develop anything. It was more like a design idea. And so as you do in hackathons, we did have some technical people on the team, so they did some basic code of a framework of what we were going to do, but it wasn't a product. It wasn't even an MVP. But we just walked into that investment like, yeah, we won $1 million. That meeting bombed, as it should have. And when it came to speaking to Dan and his team, he already had, I think they already had like some people internally working on it. And basically, it was too discoordinated to actually kick off like it was supposed to. The plan was you take the hackathon concept, we deploy it with M-Pharma, we get a project win with them, and then they pay us for it, blah, blah, blah. But because it was just a hodgepodge of random people on the weekend going to do something for fun, we didn't really have the coordination or know-how on how to move that forward. So it was just kind of a validation that there's something here, but like our ability to understand their problem and kind of put together a mini solution for it was there. And then based off of that, they get introductions to VCs. We was like, okay, we've spoken with a VC, we've spoken to a potential user and customer. They've said that they like what we're doing, so that's what entrepreneurship is. And then, Capsule is literally a evolution of that. We just ended up meeting up every day, working on this, talking to more people, and slowly but surely, Capsule evolved from that. So we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for M-Pharma.
So tell me a little bit about the problem that you were trying to solve. Not maybe for M-Pharma. What's the problem you're trying to solve now?
The Capsules have many different lives. Startups do. So we've
all of us
pivoted, we've merged, we've built products, scrapped products. But what we're doing now is a very defined problem that we're solving. So what we essentially saw was two things. One, because of my background was selling to multinationals and to big companies, I already knew the type of data that they wanted in Africa. And we initially thought that we'll get that data through managing supply chains, tracking products and all of that, so that they actually know what are the disease prevalences in different countries, or what's the patient demographics looking like, and what's the financial viability of certain markets. That's what they want data to do. Like to
sell medicine.
Yeah, to sell medicines, to know where they should be investing in R&D. Like very, very simply put.
Yeah.
The problem with the African market is that it's so fragmented and it's so nascent that for multinationals to actually have that information is super difficult. there are companies that provide healthcare data in other markets, and they have those really covered. But then Africa is like this giant black hole where it's just like a whole continent is just like, don't know what's happening in that. So we knew that there is demand and buyers if you have the data. Now, we went in with the assumption that most people have when thinking about Africa is that the data doesn't exist. So the reason why we're thinking of managing supply chains and all of that is so that we can collect primary data and we can actually provide insights into what's happening by collecting that data as a first point. But the more we've been in the space, we actually realize there's a lot of data that exists on the continent and a lot of varied data, whether it's on healthcare delivery, whether it's on supply chain performance, whether it's on how many site or how many beds or lab equipment is being used at a hospital or doctor utilization, all of that data is being captured. But what we realize is that it's very, very siloed. So you can't, it's like puzzle pieces and you just have them scattered around. They're not interconnected. They don't talk to each other. There's no way of understanding what's actually happening at a market level. So then what we realize is, hold on a minute. If we go and find the data on the continent that we can piece together, and then we can sell that aggregated insights to the companies that we've already built relationships with, we know we've worked with for a number of years. And that, I guess, in a long story short, we realize you have a very fragmented data market on the continent, and then you have a very consolidated buyer market in Europe and US, in developed markets. So what we're doing is collecting and aggregating data from various different sources. So it could be hospitals, hospital software or EMRs, or pharmacy management software, health insurers, health tech companies. And what we're doing is piecing together the pieces of data that they have to build a clear narrative of what's happening on the continent, and then selling that to multinationals so that they can actually make those financial decisions, whether this market is worth entering, whether there's enough patients in this country for this particular disease, or whether it's worth investing in R&D in this country. And we've seen this as being a serious, there's been a lot of growth in this area for us. And I guess most recently what we realized is that no health tech has managed to successfully commercialize the healthcare data to the big players. And with our approach, what we realize is we're actually able to help them commercialize their data in a risk-free way by being able to, by already having those relationships with the data buyers and knowing what format they want it in, how they want it, what questions they want answered, and so on. And then we build those connections with those health tech companies and insurance and hospitals, etc. Put it all together and then sell it to those customers. And then we share some of the profit back with the people who've given us the data in the first place. So we just realized, hold on, it's just a two-sided marketplace and there's no bridge between the two. And then what Capsule is now is essentially that bridge by us connecting multinationals who want to know what's happening in Africa with the actual entities that are generating the data that the customers want. And then putting it all together.
I mean, one can think that the Ministry of Health, their website has all this data.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. Like, Rwanda is a particular great use case. And in fact, it's a great use case for the health ministry data managing it, but also how data in Africa could be used to drive healthcare forward. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the hepatitis C elimination in Rwanda and how that's happened.
Oh, not really.
Okay, so this is a really, really cool story. So back in 2015, hepatitis C prevalence in Rwanda was about 3% of the population, so relatively super high. And then you had in California, Gilead Pharmaceuticals, which is a California-based pharmaceutical company, was developing a first-in-class treatment for hepatitis C, potentially groundbreaking. But they had a problem. They didn't have patients and they didn't have sites so they can run clinical trials at. So you have this company who's making a treatment for a drug, but they don't have the patients. Now, because Rwanda's Ministry of Health had a very good health data and then also had all of the digital processes to capture data when patients are being treated and things like that. The government was actually able to proactively approach Gilead Pharmaceuticals and say, hey, you need patients and sites. We have patients and the ability to capture the data you need. And that was actually done by the government's office, being very, very proactive. And what they did is Gilead Pharmaceuticals ended up running their trials here in Rwanda. They did the early stage trials, proved that the drug was effective, got the drug approved, and then have been able to release the approved drug in Rwanda, which has helped it on its hepatitis C elimination strategy. So from 2015 to 2022, it dropped, I think, tenfold from 3% to 0.35% as of 2022. It's close to being eliminated in the country as a whole. It should be in the next year or two. And that's
because of that.
Because of having the data and having it really well managed, and then having proactive government that would actually go out and talk to a private company based out in California. But what we're essentially doing is taking that concept to the digital age and then doing it so you don't need to rely on everything being centralized as it is in Rwanda, which is a unique case where not only in Rwanda you're collecting the data, the government is managing it and able to utilize it in a useful way. We're just doing that at a broader scale. So essentially bringing that use case to any African country without needing everything to be managed centrally from the Ministry of Health. So Rwanda is actually a great use case on how that potential could work. But I think with Rwanda being a smaller country, strong governance, strong government, etc., it's a unique use case that it can happen like that here. Whereas when you think of the continent as a whole, and the way that we see it as in Capsule, is that with the private sector in particular, because they're incentivized by, like any business, by delivering service to patients or customers that will pay for the service and to improve it, they're already capturing data as part of their day-to-day operations anyway. So what we found is the private sector on the continent is actually running very, very similar to essentially managed, government or health ministry is doing that. But that's been our secret. So just finding private sector institutions, whether they be health tech, whether they be private hospital groups or private insurers, who are collecting the data to improve their businesses, but they're all connecting a small puzzle piece that if you put them together, you can actually understand what's happening on the whole. And that's what the multinationals are paying for.
And what about selling data, health data? That's last time I checked, it was a sensitive thing to do, right? I know a lot of health tech entrepreneurs who always are trying to, work with the government to, publish the data, and then there's always someone in the government saying we cannot publish that. So how does that work? Like, do you need to work with governments in your case? Yeah. And how do you work with them?
That's a great question. And that's something that we're super passionate about. So you're completely right. When it comes to health data, you do not want large corporates, no-name people knowing what conditions individuals have. And I guess what we realized with Capsule is you don't actually need to have any personal information in the data that's useful for the companies. So for instance, if you were to say 50 people in this particular sector in Rwanda have hypertension, and this is how their age demographic is broken down, like 5 are between the age of 20 and 30, 10 are between the age of 50 and 60, etc. That doesn't compromise anyone's personal data. And that's the type of information that we're sharing with our customers. So it's a all aggregate level, high level data where you can't actually figure out who it is based on the information that you share. So we actually consulted with a number of experts in the space, and at both a Rwanda level, a African Union level, we've been like deep in this space to do it. And what we realized is if you're doing things at an aggregate and you're segmenting it in such a way where you cannot identify who they are, and particularly having data anonymization before it's shared with Capsule, and then we take that anonymized data and then combine it with other sources of anonymized data, you still end up with a picture of saying, let's say one of the use cases that we have is the growth rate of this particular market. Let's say Zimbabwe, for instance, the drug consumption in Zimbabwe is growing at 5% per year. And these are the breakdowns of drugs that are being used. And these are the generics and these are the branded products. Like no individual person's information is shared in that. Or if you say we have a hotspot of sickle cell disease in Nigeria and in South Africa, and these are the hospitals that treat most of these patients, no one's personal data is compromised in that. So it's more, what we realize is if we use data to answer questions that don't require specific information of a patient, we can actually commercialize healthcare data in a way that's fully compliant with the African Union laws, their Convention on Cybersecurity, Data Protection. It's compliant with GDPR, like all of the major HIPAA, all of the major health data regulations. If you're just giving information that has the data that the client wants, but it's at an accurate level.
And so how does your day-to-day operations look like? Do you just have like a bunch of, graduates going to these hospitals and trying to collect all the data in papers and you put that in your system? Or how do you collect the data?
Yeah, so we focus on companies that are already digitized. And I say companies because we go for the private sector primarily. We've done a little bit with NGOs, but the private sector is where we focus because what we've noticed is they tend to already have a lot of the processes in place that we need. They have some form of digitization, so they're capturing data on the patients, what diseases they have, what treatment pathways are on, what the outcomes are, etc. And then we do a hub and spoke approach. So what we try and do is target groups which have many facilities underneath that. So we only need one person's permission and then we get multiple sites from that. So that could be software providers, so the EMR companies that are supporting a number of hospitals, or it could be a hospital group which has loads of different facilities underneath it. So we only need one signature and then we can pull in 10, 20, 100 sites in some cases. And that's been our approach. But we do have the capability of doing one-to-one, relationships with each pharmacy, with each hospital. It's just so time consuming. And there's a whole re-education process where we have to tell them, this is how we use the data, this is what we're going to do. We have to explain everything from first principles. But when you're dealing with a larger group, you have that conversation less times, and usually they understand how our business makes money, how our business works a little bit easier.
Yeah. And you said, so do you go to them and say, this is the company we're going to sell the data to? Or you just say, we might sell it to anybody?
Yeah, so we have both approaches. We have, I guess our business model has two streams. One is more the subscription, where it's like, this is the type of data that we'd be collecting, and this is the type of organization that we'll sell it to. And that's more of the aggregate data. So let's say yourself and 4 other companies provide the data to Capsule. We combine it to one master data. You then have a subscription that we can provide to multinationals, and then they would pay, and then we'll pay each of you in proportion to the amount and quality of the data you provide. The second way, which is actually the primary way that we most work with most of the companies, is on a project basis. So what we realize is there's a bunch of situations where our clients would need very specific data for a specific use case for a specific period of time. So they would, let's just say they're working on an NGO-funded project, which is looking at hypertension, for instance. They would have a need for data on hypertension in that particular country at that particular time, and then the need is gone. And in those cases, we just say, okay, what data do you need? What question are you trying to answer? What specific data elements need to be included in that? Take a good requirement list from them, and then we go out and reach to our network of data partners and then just say, hey, we've got a client who's willing to pay $30,000, and as you're the only one that we have in our network which has data on this, we can split 50-50. Are you happy with that? And if they are, then they just share the anonymized data to answer that question, and then it's kind of done. They don't really have to do any work. So we can take in data, whatever format works for them, whether it's a data dump, CSV, cloud, the cloud account access, whatever they work with, they send it to us and we handle everything, and then we just give them money at the end of it. So what we found is working, particularly with health tech companies, the latter way is actually most appealing to them, because everyone's promised their investors, we're going to sell data at some point to some company.
Yeah.
But with us, we actually have all of the data buyers there. Our problem is we're getting too many requests and not having the data. So they think, David, do you have this? David, do you have that? Hey, how much? Not right now, but what can I So
Yeah.
what I'm actually focused on most now is really just getting the word out there to many health tech companies, small insurers, some large insurers. We've managed to get on board some sort of big names. Unfortunately, I can't name them here, but that should be public information pretty soon. But we've been able to get big players, small players to realize, hey, we might be sitting on a gold mine here. And because the opportunities that we work on are usually time bound, we're just like, look, you could try and sell it yourself, but you would have the problem of needing to find the right customer at the right time, being able to go through the bureaucratic process to know who the buyer is. That can cost you, what, $300,000 in employee time, and then 5 years to learn how to do.
And that's not your core business.
Exactly.
So,
or you can just have a 50-50 relationship with Capsule. We do all of that. We just say, hey, here's the money at the end of it. So that conversation has been really easy to have with loads of different tech founders. In particular, they've been, I don't think I've had one pushback from a tech founder so far. But yeah, it's like anyone who's collecting, generating health data on the continent, we have the buyers who are coming to us continuously. Yeah. We don't have the data enough.
Is there a way to get them to pay so that funds your data collection?
So
that's the first, yeah, exactly. So you can tell them, hey, we don't have the data, but if you pay pre-order, basically pay first, and then you basically use that money to fund your efforts to collect more data.
So that works on the subscription side of the business, but it doesn't really work on the product side because those are time bound. So if you have a USAID funded project, they'll put out the what's it called, the mission that they're working on, and then you would have 3 months to deliver a proposal, and then you find out yes or no. So it's one of those where a client isn't really prepared to pay upfront in the project-based things unless they know the data right there. Whereas on the subscription side, yes, that's been something we've been able to negotiate and do with a couple of big Fortune 500 players. But for us, we're actually in a pretty interesting situation at the moment where we've gotten to the stage where the business is break even. So that was a huge milestone for us. We've managed to figure out the mechanics, the unit economics, etc., so that we know the business fundamentally works. We're now thinking, is it better to raise capital so that we can just go out and build those data relationships proactively, whether it's just pay someone to have access and still give them profit share at the end of the day. That could be one approach. Or whether we just keep going project after project, building up our network and doing it that way. So far we're doing the latter, but we've started speaking to investors. We've had loads of investors proactively reach out to us. I haven't really been here in the streets doing fundraising proactively, but we've started engaging with quite a few investors who want to come on board, because what they say is, yeah, you can keep doing it this way, but if you put in capital, you can supercharge it and get across. But we've had a lot of growth. Like in the past 6 months, we've got to
ask, like, what's your traction right now?
So since we started this truly about a year and a half ago, this is our latest pivot. But in the last 6 months, we've ended up in 6 countries, pulling in over probably closer to like 17 million patient records at the moment. So we're able to...
I need to do better marketing. It is do better marketing.
Yeah. We've managed to get a lot of data pretty quickly, just based off of like us doing it as a tiny sort of 8-man team doing that. So we've gotten over 70 hospitals across Africa. Over 500 pharmacies. Like there's lots of data points that are coming in now. So from our point of view, is we've been able to get this much purely off our own steam, and this is me doing it part-time. When I consider all the other things I'm doing, I've been leading all of the partnership discussions, I've been leading the sales discussions at the same time. So it's a case of we've been able to build a small break-even business, tech business that is truly like tech, because all we're doing is pulling in data and then reselling it to multinationals. So we don't require much overheads or staff to expand to a new market. We literally just find out, we have a data partner in Cameroon. Okay, cool. You can pull data from Cameroon now. We have a data partner from Egypt. Oh, cool. We're now in Egypt now. So that's kind of our approach. So what we've done now is we had our short list of clients, our current clients, and then our prospective ones. And then we went to all of them and said, okay, what markets do you really want data on in Africa? Because one thing which was uncomfortable for us to hear, and will be very uncomfortable for any health tech founder who has commercializing healthcare data on their roadmap, the market in Africa is tiny. And big pharma doesn't care about Africa right now because it's so small. When you consider the proportion of the revenues to other markets like Japan or the US or the EU, it's still so small. So for us to have, just to give you an example, for an African markets to be comparable to a European one, we need to get coverage of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda, for instance, all of those countries to equal the commercial value of one European country. So when you have that sort of dynamic, it's like you need so much data and you need to build those relationships so much. So I guess I'm saying all of that to say, what we're building for the future, and we're building for future demand. So it's kind of and this is sort of more of a fundamental philosophy or business philosophy that the team and I are going on. It's more, do we raise the money to fulfill future demand, or do we keep growing to fulfill demand that's here right now? Right now, we know that we have more demand for data than we have the data. So it's like, okay, that's the trigger for us to hire, to raise, etc., so that we can actually just fill all the hiring requests that we have coming in now. How I think we're likely going to move forward, don't hold me to this, because in a year's time I might have gone a completely different strategy, but we want to raise enough money so that we can fulfill all of our current demand. And then every time a request comes in, we have the data partners that can go. And then once we're there, we hit break even, and then we reassess, okay, what's our path to growing? Because what we've done now is we've just taken a poll from all of our current clients and prospective clients and say, which countries do you care about the most? And they've given us a short list of countries. Some of them surprised us because we're like, really? You have the ones which are always expected. Nigeria is always there. But if anyone's watching from Zambia or Mauritius or Botswana, reach out because those countries are of particular interest. So it surprised me when you have much bigger populations and other things. You have the Kenyas, the
South Africas.
Yeah, they're still interesting. Ghana's, Kenya's, etc. They're still interesting, but the ones that our clients are like, go on, if you have data there, let's go. Yeah. So that's kind of our approach now. We just want to make sure, fulfill the current customer demand, hit break even, then we can start strategically looking where we're going to get our next phase of growth.
How's your fundraising journey been like since you started, and actually philosophy as well, right? Well, when you start, how did you start, and changed?
So my fundraising journey started as a complete idiot. So reading these books about Peter Thiel and all these people raising money off the back of a napkin, I was like, that's how it's done. So like I mentioned earlier, that's how we approached our first meeting and absolutely bombed it. Absolutely bombed it. So it's only uphill from there.
Yeah.
And then I guess we bought into the canon of a lot of Silicon Valley where you raise money, whether it's, friend or family around $250,000 with friends and family, and then you do all that. We thought, that's just how it's done. And we tried to replicate that for a very long time. It took a very long time to realize, this isn't working as we thought. So he ended up requiring a lot more direct bootstrap cash or capital from ourselves. So we did the friend and family round, but that was just us putting in our own capital. So putting a lot of our own personal funds to at least get something that was worth someone's time to look at. And I think that was the piece that if I was to do it again, I would have done it completely differently. But at the time, it was just like, okay, we need to raise money so that we can pay developers to build something that we can show a potential investor that we have something tangible, that we have skin in the game, that we're actually building tech. And then we did the sort of accelerator route. So I went into, firstly, just as a COVID pandemic started, I went into a pre-accelerator sort of training course, which is predominantly American. It was called Build With, which is a great community, and there's some great founders in there that I still keep in touch with. And they were just a bunch of underrepresented founders who were building tech businesses, and then we had mentorship from a Techstars MD and a VC, and they were basically saying, this is what you have to do to look appealing to investors. So that all lasted for about 3 months. Off the back of that, we got into Startup Bootcamp, and then off the back of that, we got into Founders Factory Africa, and then we've just raised bits of money here and there, and it's been predominantly on safes. Our fundraising philosophy has changed quite a bit. For us, it was first, you just raise money because that's what you do. That didn't work. Then it's like,
you need a LinkedIn article.
And you raise money to hit certain milestones, which I think we were at for a long period. I think most founders are in that mindset now. We've progressed from that. We think it can work, but you're okay. This is potentially going to go into a longer monologue, but this is Haden and I were speaking about it, where we realized the genius of the VC marketing, and then we were just sitting there and it was just like, look, if you want to build an army, you want a bunch of warriors are prepared to do kamikaze.
Yeah.
And it's like they'll burn themselves, burn the ships. They'll take out the enemy at all costs. Then you have the maximum chance of winning if you're a general. And then we're just like, that's kind of the approach that VCs have promoted to founders, where you burn the boats, you put all your capital in, you kind of go all out so that they will fight tooth and nail day and night to make their company succeed.
Mm.
But for the VC to win, or for the general to win, they don't need every soldier to survive. They only need a few.
Exactly.
And then we realized, hold on, they just want us to be personally as motivated and driven to succeed so that their chance for capital returns are highest, but they don't actually care if it's us or company next to us that actually survives or dies. And once we had that sort of conversation, we were just like, we need to approach this in a very, very different way. We need to ensure our survival before we go and get their money, because otherwise we're on a kamikaze mission. It's like, they say you jump off a plane and learn how to build it before you hit the ground. And I'm just like, that's just kamikaze mentality. So we just like, okay, let's be smart about this. Our job isn't to return, how to put it? We want to return capital to our investors, but that isn't why we exist. We exist to build a business. So we need to maximize the chance of building a business while they are focusing on maximizing their chances of return. And those slightly different incentives means that you have slightly different mindsets. So while I still believe that building towards milestones is a good thing to do, or fundraising to hit a milestone is a good thing to do, I don't think it's a complete story. I think if you take it one step further and then you fix the holes in your bucket as you're growing to the next milestone, and then you get break even, you freed yourself off the impending cliff. So you don't need to go back into fundraising mode, kamikaze mode again. So for us, we've developed something that we call the stairs approach, where after each raise, we're going to, as quickly as possible, hit break even at that new level before we then decide to raise again, and then hit break even at the new scale.
Really?
And if we do it that way, we're ensuring that the business fundamentals are there, that we're figuring out all of the holes in our business, all the holes in our revenues, in our churn, all of those things that could kill the business. We're sorting them out. And then once we prove, okay, well, we've clocked this level, let's go to the next one. Then we raise to go even bigger. And that's kind of what our fundraising philosophy is now. And it's so much better being in conversation with investors where you can be like, I'm not proactively going out to market to raise capital, but I'm open to taking capital. And this is what I need from you before I take your capital. And if you don't like the terms, it's been nice talking to you.
Yeah.
And then we've had one investor, for instance, say to us, oh, you don't have A, B, and C things, so please let us know when you're doing your next raise. No. It's fine. Like, this is the window where a check size that you're willing to offer is interesting for us. Next stage, why don't I be talking to you about it? It's as simple as that. And it may sound arrogant. It may make people feel uncomfortable, but it feels so good.
I just think you need to be arrogant at some point.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that, the investors just don't know how much work you're putting in, and the thing is, it feels like you're begging, money from them. And, I like the approach of not actively looking for money.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, it also gets pretty addictive. Also, it's I believe a huge time waste.
Yep.
Right. You should be focusing on building the product, speaking to customers, closing their customers. That's really what you should be doing. And, once you do that, then investors just come to you, and they come in giving you terms that, on the terms that you want.
Yeah. It was funny. There's one investor. I hope he hears this. And I
We'll send it to
him. Sure, we'll send it to him after. But he, after our conversation, he was like, "Wow, you're the first founder that's grilled me," because I did the pitch, whatnot, and he did the usual. This is my background. This is what I do. This is the check says. Okay. What do you actually do? What's your job? He said his background. I was like, no. What do you actually do? Like, who do you know? Like, what positions? What events were you speaking at? What network do you have? Because I need to speak to these type of people. Can you get me in front of these people? And then he's said, okay, well, yes, I've done this or this. I was like, okay. How much do you know about this process? Can you explain it to me? Can you explain the steps? Do you know the nuance difference between the African market and the US market? I don't know the US market at all. Explain it to me. I want to understand. So it ended up being like that. It was a really good conversation. I really, really like him. We're still in conversation, blah, blah, blah. But his response was, he called me on my phone afterwards, and he was like, I've never been grilled like that. He's like, I like it. And I was just like, it's because I'm like, I don't want to be spending my time doing this dance and quoting and all of this stuff where you're like, they'll probably invest or they may not. And let's
catch us up. But exactly.
Keep you updated on how things going. I'm like, you're out because we're moving forward regardless. And it's like, on your point on fundraising being a huge time suck, at the end of 2022, Femi, Hanan, and I, we did an analysis. We did our sort of annual review. We looked at the past year, and we were just like, okay, what have we all contributed to the business? And then it came out to my turn, and it was a very harsh piece of feedback I got from the boys, where the conclusion was, I spent a year to buy a year. They're like, you had not really contributed to the business at all. You hadn't really been available, and you spend a year to buy a year. Is this the best use of your time? You're well networked. You're a salesperson where you could be putting that energy into getting customers, which is recurring investment or in return a recurring capital. You could have focused on building partnerships. You could have focused on getting in front of government. Why has spending a year to buy a year been a good use of your time? And I was just sitting there saying, I don't know.
Felt fun in the process.
And you feel important. You feel, well,
meeting great people. You have a call with somebody.
Yeah. And then after that, I was like, forget that. I genuinely believe I'm one of the top salespeople that you can have. And I believe I'm one of the top best speakers when I'm at conferences or forums or webinars, whatever. And I'm just like, I'm not using any of my skill set to drive more business into the company. I'm using that skill set to play monkey to a bunch of investors. And I was just like, no, I'm done being like an entertainer, just trying to get them hyped and interested about the problem. I know the problem exists. I know money's there. Why don't I focus on getting the customer money? And then any investor that wants to join the ship, they can. If they want to dilly-dally, we'll move on without them. And that's kind of my mentality now. So
I wanted to go back a little bit when you said you invested your own personal money.
Mm-hmm.
When did you know that, okay, this might be worth me putting my money in?
It was when I realized what the money meant to me. The money meant security for me personally. And I realized it was philosophically, they were diametrically opposed. I was holding on to quite a sizable sum of money, which I accumulated through my career, etc. And then I wanted the security of that, but then I wanted to step out into entrepreneurship and kind of being on a paddle boat in the wide ocean. And for me, it was kind of, I had to be honest with myself. I was like, do I want security or do I want to bet on myself? And I said to, and I was sitting down thinking to myself, and I thought, I'll only get to make this decision once. Am I going to bet on myself or am I going to look for security? Because I can lose all the money and I can make it back again. But I can't bet on myself at this moment in time ever again. So it was a weird response to this question is that I didn't actually feel like the business was ready. It was more a case of, am I prepared to bet on myself or not? Because what I realized is me going out and asking for other people's money was essentially putting the personal responsibility on someone else's dime. And I think that is important for many founders or wannabe founders or people who are considering entrepreneurship to realize unless you're really prepared to take a huge bet on yourself, probably isn't the life for you. Because once I made that mental shift, this is a lot of money. I'm going to part with it. I may never see it again. I may have to start from scratch. But I genuinely believe that the version of me in the future will be thankful that I was able to let go of what I had at the time. It was just more of a philosophical decision that I had with myself. And then, so your personal income just go down in terms of the cash flow from not having the job, or seeing your savings, that you had a lot of, just dwindle and go away, and you pump it all into the company. But I think for me, it was just super. That was my equivalent of burning the boats. It just made me think, I'm all in on this now, because no one's going to save me. I don't have a family that can bail me out financially if things go tits up. I don't have that traditional safety net. But I believe that between myself, Hanan, and Femi, with all of our head, like I believe that we're all hardworking, we're all smart, and we're all high integrity. So I genuinely believe it's impossible for the three of us putting all of our headspace and energy into doing something which we believe and which we know is good for the world, in that we're trying to increase healthcare and healthcare access and all of that. I don't believe there's a universe where we fail, because all of the things we're trying to do are with the most noble of intent, and we're trying to do it in the highest integrity way. And I genuinely I believe in God. I believe in a higher power, and I don't believe God would allow us to fail when we're trying to do right and doing our best to do right. So I guess once I had that kind of spiritual, reflective discussion with myself, is like, I have to do this. It's like, if I wasn't prepared to do this, I shouldn't be in the game. Yeah. And then the final piece to that is one of my personal favorite poems, and it's actually the Capsule motto is "all the way." It's a snippet from the poem where it's from Charles Bukowski, and he says, "If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start." And right at the beginning, I thought, if I'm going to start, I have to go all the way. And it's like, am I prepared to take whatever pain comes with this decision? Otherwise, I shouldn't start. And then once I decided I'm going to start, I'm just like, I'm all in. So,
isn't it for everybody?
Hell no. I'd argue it's probably not even for me. But you just learn how to deal with it, because I think the amount of personal sacrifice that is required, both of your time, your energy, your capital, stress, for you to eat last, entrepreneurship's like the worst. You're taking on all the risk and you get to benefit last. Yeah. So it's kind of like, let's say and I've spoken to founders who've been through the whole journey right through to exit, and then because of liquidation pressures and just walk away with no money. So they built a company, sold for 20 million and walked away with zero. And I'm just like, bro, how's that feel?
Imagine the pain, man.
Like zero. And he's just like, yeah, I basically worked a salary job. And I'm just like, that's a possibility. For every one of us to do in entrepreneurship, you can put your heart and soul into it. You can build all of this, and there's a huge possibility / probability that you walk away with zero, or something which you could have made in like 2-3 years working for a company and saving a salary and going on holiday. Like,
so why would you do it?
It is hard, but I think there are certain people who are just rebellious in a certain way, and you cannot stand your life when you're being told what to do. And I think that, going back to the earlier story of my dad, it really made me have an issue with authority. I was always respectful. I was always polite in school, university, my career. I was always able to get far in life because people liked me and because I was respectful, but I hated authority. I just knew how to kind of hold it in and hide it. And so I think unless you really, really dislike authority and you like accountability, it's not for you. And I'd say, for instance, it's like I box on the side professionally as well. And I very much compare it to fighting, in that you can do all of the talk, all of the training, but once you're in the ring and there's someone who's trained for 6, 8, 12 weeks to do harm to you, there's no way you can run. And I'd say entrepreneurship is exactly the same. You have to look your opponent in the eyes and be like, I'm going to take you out, or I'm going to go down trying. Like, there's only 2 outcomes. Only one of us are walking out of this situation. And having that level of stress and belief in yourself is a prerequisite, and I don't think everyone has it. I feel like very, very few people have the ingredients that can help them survive that.
So why should anybody do it? Who should do it? That's it.
I'd say people who are glutton for punishment and people who enjoy the hard-fought victories. And I compare it to fighting all the time because, like, everyone says that the training is the worst part of fighting, where everyone hates it, your body aches, like you feel like you're about to throw up, whatever. But nothing compares to the feeling of victory after a fight. Like, it's one of the best feelings in the world. And it's like, if you're prepared to suffer for so long to have that one moment of victory, that's what entrepreneurship is. And you suffer, and the victories, they get bigger and bigger over time. And the pain you have to endure between the wins it gets bigger and bigger over time. So it's like your pain threshold has to go up, but the win is bigger each time. That's what keeps you going. It's just that feeling of victory where you're just like, I can't believe what I've just accomplished with people that I hold dear to me, my close friends, my co-founders, my team. I cannot believe what we just managed to do. Let's go again. And at bigger stakes next time. And then it's just like, you just put yourself through torture and pain for months and months and months. And then maybe at the end of it, you win. And then similarly to fighting, maybe you do all of that preparation and then lose. And there's no feeling worse than losing. I can tell you, I've lost so many nights of sleep over the fights I've lost. It like haunts you. You could just be walking around in the day and you get a flashback of a particular punch that hit you and you're just like, I can't believe that hit me.
Yeah.
Or you
hit the gym again.
Yeah, or then you see a punch bag in the gym and you just see the face of the guy that beat you and you're just like, I need to get him. He's a fighter to get us. So it's like, it's very, very similar in entrepreneurship where you can put yourself through so much pain and it's still like a 50-50 shot, whether it's success or failure at the end of a whole bunch of work. And it's addictive.
It's super addictive. How do you feel like you've grown, or do you feel like you've changed? Entrepreneurship has changed you.
Funny enough, entrepreneurship's changed me a lot in that it's not about the money anymore. And I think I went in wanting freedom, and I thought the key to freedom was money. So my reason for looking at entrepreneurship is that I thought, okay, it's a way you can accumulate wealth, and it's a way that you can do it where you have freedom. And from the case of being in healthcare, you can actually do some good in the world along the way as well. So that was kind of my thinking. But I think how I've changed is it sounds a bit cheesy, but it's like, I'm curious to know who I could become and what I'm capable of. Because there's been so many situations where I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm this kid from Wembley. Like, what am I doing here? So, like, even last week, I was at a webinar hosted by the African CDC, Global Fund, Oslo University, Africa Health Business. And I was talking on the panel alongside them about data, how data could be utilized in healthcare, and etc. And I sent it to my mom, and I was just like, and she had a mom's reaction, super proud, thanking God, all of that. But I was just sitting there thinking, how on earth did I end up in this situation?
Yeah.
Like, huh? I wasn't even the smartest kid at school. I did.
I'm on a paddle.
Yeah, and then like for the last few months, I've had many experiences where I've just sat down and thought, how on earth am I in these situations? I'm in Rwanda, like talking on healthcare and being in data and all that. I don't have a technology background. I'm just like, I'm a geneticist nerd who went into sales and wanted to learn how to sell stuff to big companies. And I'm like, now I'm thinking here on a podcast like this. I was just like, what? But it's just more the curiosity about where the journey will take you. I think for me is what the number one thing is. And is that I look at my team as well. And I look at Hannah and I look at Femi. And look at Lorenz, our chief of staff, and how she's changed as well. And there's another thing, like having looking at members of your team and then seeing some of the things that they're accomplishing, and you're like, when we hired you, it's just like a chat with drinks at No Skin, and then you just say, cool. And then now you're an expert at what you're doing, and you can talk to it so confidently, and we're comfortable to kind of put you on the stage or things like that. And I'm just like, that journey is priceless. And I realized for me, it's more curiosity about what else am I capable of? What more can I do? What more can I accomplish? What impact can I have? Because I believe if you have that philosophy of like being resilient, running into a wall, iterating, going at it again, the money will come. It may come in 1 year, may come in 5 years, may come in 10 years, but you'll figure out a way where the money will come. But you can't ever relive these experiences. And those are the things that money can't buy. And like being able to say, my close friends in London, we decided to, on a whim, move to Rwanda, which none of us have ever been to before, start up a life here, then build a technology company. And it's like,
What is Rwanda, by the way?
Yeah, it was a mix of luck and opportunity.
Yeah.
So the luck was more, we were in the mindset where we knew we needed to move to Africa because we were running Capsule from London. And you can't run an African health tech from London. I don't care what anyone says. We were still high off the COVID, everyone on Zoom. So we thought, there's no need to be on the ground in the modern time. But then once the world started opening back up again, we was like, we need to be on the ground. So we were looking at Nigeria. We went there. We were thinking about Ghana. We were thinking about Nairobi. Just a few locations where we were like, okay, where's a good place to be based out of? And then we got into the health tech hub. And then just like one little paragraph at the end of the email, and they said, we offer a year's free space at Norskin. Like, Norskin? And then we was like, they offer us an office space in Rwanda. And then I was like, boys, I think this is December 15th, this email. I was like, boys, there's an office in Rwanda. They're apparently building this Norskin thing, this health tech hub. Let's check it out. And they're like, what do you mean let's check it out? I was like, let's book a flight, let's go. And they had it like, David, it's a scam. Here is the email, here is it. I was like, read it. Like, I mean, it's just like, all it had was the CAD images, like the 3D printed concept of what Norskin would be like on the website. He's like, it's not even a real building, look, it was all CGI. And I was like, yeah, but look, they have one in Stockholm. They say they have one in Kigali. Let's open. Let's go. Anyway, Hannah and I were back and forth for like a week, and then he was like, "I was letting it go." I was like, "We gotta go." Reggie was hard. Fine, let's go. And then we just called up Chen. He was like, "Oh, February, we're gonna go to Rwanda. You coming?" He was like, "Huh?" Like, what was I do? Rwanda? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, we'll go in. And he was like, you serious? He was like, yep. And then I was like, well, back in the tickets now. And then Femi was like, what, for 2 weeks or something? And Hannah goes, 3 months. And she was like, are you serious? And he was like, yep, cool. Then we booked it. And we flew, I think it was like the 10th of January or something. So within a couple of weeks of finding out Norskin existed, and then January rolled around and we was on a flight back to Les, and we was like, okay. I think the boys was like, if it's bad, we only booked a 3 month ticket. We could always come back and go back to our old lives. But yeah, after 3 months, we were just like, we got to move out here properly. So we just went back to London, closed out our lives there, and then moved everything over here. And everyone in like our families and friends was like, Rwanda? And it's like in the UK, the only thing they heard about Rwanda was about the deportation of British illegal immigrants, and they heard about the genocide. That was it. So that was all we kept putting.
Yeah.
Why are you going to this place? My mom was like over tears. She was like, David, why would you do this? You had a good job. I'm just like, how's it done, Mom? Yes, we done. It's not coming. And then I got here. I was just like, what on earth? This is not what, like, the media portrays it as a tool. And growing up in London, in Europe, it's just the perception of Africa is so skewed that they have people of African descent almost scared to go back and just visit. And it's so strange where it's like growing up, for instance, you'd always have wealthy sort of European people who talk about their trips to Kenya in a safari, and then I'd have my Kenyan friends who are like, I'm scared to go back. Whenever I go back, my parents send me to the village or something like that. And it's like we always had that sort of fear of being relocating back to the continent. But then when I did that here, I'm just like, guys, like, come out here. So I had my friends come out to visit, my mom, my sisters, and everyone's just been like, David, this is like incredible. Like, and it feels really frustrating that I know that there's so many Africans in the diaspora that are kind of afraid of coming back because they feel like there's nothing here to come back to. When for me, it's more like this is where all the opportunities are. Like the infrastructure is going to get built. It's just who's going to be the one to build it. The technology is going to get built. It's who's the one who's going to do it. And the ones who come and do it, whether it's an African from the diaspora coming back, or if it's someone from China, or if it's someone from the US or Europe, someone's going to come and build it. And I think it's it'll be a bit strange if people who have cultural or heritage ties to the continent aren't the ones building it, but people who are just looking to make money or do whatever are. So I'd definitely say if like people who have cultural ties to Africa should definitely at least come back to just see what the lay of the land is or what the landscape is like.
Yeah, I know you read a lot of books, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying to get into books, man. I don't know how to. First of all, what's your advice for somebody like me who wants to get into reading books? I love reading articles, on Medium or Substack or something like that. Those are great. But reading the whole book of like 500 pages, I want to, but I just don't know how to do that. First of all, what's your advice there? And then we can get into some book recommendations.
Okay. So I'm actually going to steal someone else's advice. Naval Ravikant, one of the gurus of Silicon Valley. He says something which I followed and it worked for me. He says, read what you love until you love to read. So if you like the Substacks and the articles, I'd say just go deeper into that, because eventually what you end up finding is that the sources that you go to don't quite scratch the itch enough. And then you just go to a short book and then a longer book and so on. And for me, it was exactly that. I didn't read. I didn't like reading at all. Like I was one of those where in video games I just skip. Well, anything that I had to read until I could start playing the game, and I'll just figure it out as I go along. But I think what advice I'd give is find the themes that you like reading about in the format that you like reading about it, and then find the smallest possible book that it's on the same themes, and then just go from there. Because I think for me it's more of a habit I've built by just finding out the topics I'm really, really interested in. And it was actually triggered by when my father passed away. I ended up going through an understandably kind of dark phase where I was just like, I didn't really know what I was doing with life. I was very existential in terms of, what's the point of anything that I'm working on if I'm going to die anyway? That was kind of my mindset. And I stumbled across a really, really small book, As a Man Thinketh. It's like a book you can read in like an hour. And it basically just, the whole concept of the book can be summarized by your experience life is just a reflection of your thoughts. So be on guard for your thoughts, because he has a concept of your mind is like a garden. It can either bring forth flowers or bring forth weeds, but it will bring forth something. And he just says, just be mindful of what you're cultivating in the garden of your mind. And that concept alone just made me think, okay, what is going on in the garden of my mind? And then it's like I had all the music I was listening to, all of the TV I was consuming, sports, etc., news, all these things. And I was like, no wonder why I feel like crap if everything I'm consuming isn't productive. So I was like, okay, let me change what I'm listening to. And I just swapped music for audiobooks, because I was listening to like either emo music, which is super depressing, or gangster rap, which is super aggressive. So I was either between depressed or angry, and it was my default state. And I was just like, okay, let me just swap this out for audiobooks, and maybe I'll just learn something. And then I just chose like some philosophy books, because I just wanted to get past my existentialism. And then I think after that, after the first 2 audiobooks I listened to, I then got interested in reading as a whole. And yeah, I'd just say find a topic or an area where you're actually curious, and then finding an author who speaks in the way that you think. I think that was actually what changed the game for me. It was when it was a few books, but the ones where I just was like, I love books, was after reading Principles by Ray Dalio, because the way he was speaking in the book or writing sounded like the thoughts in my head. And I was like, he's speaking in my language. It's like every single step felt completely logical, but it's like someone's showing you how to think further down the road. So I'd say that's all books are. Like when someone says they found a great book, I think it's just they found a book which was able to impart wisdom to them in a language that they understand, or in a style that feels familiar to them. And then, once you find like the topic and the author, then you kind of get into this stuff. You kind of exhaust that list, and you just end up looking somewhere else where you can find similar content. And then it just, when you like examine your life after swapping out, so whether it's YouTube time, whether it's watching football, which used to have me on an emotional roller coaster as an Arsenal fan for years, or swapping out the music I was listening to for time that I can just spend reading, it was like, I feel better, I feel more smart, I feel more equipped to address the challenges I have day to day. And I just overall felt better. And I was just like, I'm going to keep doing it. I feel better.
What are your top 3 book recommendations?
Principles by Ray Dalio has to be number 1. There's a running joke with Hannah, and that's my Bible, where it's like he lists principles by number, and he had a, long story short, each time he encountered a problem, he wrote down his rule for dealing with that problem, so that when he encountered it again, he just knew what the overall rule should be and how to deal with it. So you never feel overwhelmed by a situation. And that was exactly how I think. So it's like, what was it? 3.4, triangulate with believable people that disagree. Okay, cool. So for instance, when there was a time where my mother had a health scare, and one doctor said that she might have brain cancer. And like, they were just like, you need to go into surgery right away. And then I instantly thought back to the book Principles, and I was like, 3.4, triangulate with believable people that disagree. I was like, Mom, don't act on it yet. We're going to get a second opinion, and then we're going to get a third opinion on what the condition is and what the best treatment pathway is. Each of the 2 other doctors disagreed on what the diagnosis is and what the course of treatment was. And then once we triangulated with them, and we were like, okay, this one's saying this one's saying that, this one's saying this. We then went and we had a conversation arranged between 2 of the doctors to speak with each other. And then they agreed, actually, it might actually be a simpler thing. And then my mom was able to get a pretty routine treatment that was non-invasive. It was fine. She was okay. But it for me, that was like that was the moment where I realized this shit works. If in a personal crisis, referring to an idea that was in a book and it was around my mother's life. And I remember when I got a call when she told me that she had that, what the doctor told her the first time, and I just burst into tears. And I was in the queue to enter a Kendrick Lamar concert. I was in the concert and crying my eyes out the whole time because I was thinking, my mom's so ill.
People were thinking Kendrick Lamar's music is making you cry.
Yeah, and I was just bawling my eyes out for the whole. It was a damn tour. I'll never forget it. It was a damn tour. I was right at the front. I was hyped up, and then I get the call, and I'm just like in tears. I don't even know why I still went in, to be honest. But I guess I was thinking I paid for it, so I will see the lights, see the fireworks or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so
what was the second one?
The second book, I would say, 48 Laws of Power. I'd say that's a great book because it's more about managing the world as it is rather than how you want it to be. And it's like when you view everything from a power perspective, it explains many people's behaviors where people only ever do what they think is best for themselves 99% of the time. And then if you operate in that way, you can understand why certain things happen and you stop getting upset and you stop getting offended and you just think, okay, let me just act in a way which and this is how I like to engage with business and relationships and things in general, is if you give people enough of what they want, they will give you what you want. And it's just like, find a way of doing something that helps someone else and then it will all come back around to you. And that's really how I internalized what was in that book. And then the third, there's another philosophical book, which is Plato's Republic. That this one is a little bit of a dense one because it talks about philosophy from, I think it was Socrates writing about the perspective of Plato, but it just describes how the world works in all of its different phases. And it talks about how democracies turn into tyrannies turn into oligarchies, and et cetera, and it just describes. For me, it's a really interesting book because it describes the world so well that it's equally applicable now as it was like 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. I don't know when it was written, but it really, I feel like anything that's true is timeless. And when you find a piece of text, whether it be the I Ching in China, or you find Plato's Republic, or some piece of text that has survived the test of time, there is a lot of wisdom there. So I'd say that's the book that, for me, describes how the way the world works in the most accurate way, and also sort of people's psychologies. And there's a concept in the book called the Great Deception as well, which is an interesting concept, which I kind of liked, where the deception was that it made people believe that they were made out of particular elements, and you have people of gold, silver, bronze, and clay, or something like that. I can't remember if those are the four, but definitely gold, silver, and bronze were part of it. And you could have people like, 2 people of gold can give birth to a silver person, or 2 people of clay can give birth to a person of gold. Yeah. And it's really about finding sort of a meritocratic way to assigning people to where they're most adept. And you shouldn't expect someone to be able to accomplish something that's beyond their capabilities. And that concept is really useful for me, I guess, in a more egotistical, optimistic way, where it's kind of like, I internalize it like, yeah, it's a great deception. He says it's a lie, whatever. But I was like, I'm going to trick myself into believing this lie. So I may have been a person born from parents of clay or something like that, but I'm a person of gold. And it's just a case of me going through the life experiences that I need to, putting myself into situations where I can actually actualize that I'm a person of gold. So it just really kind of gave me a framework to analyze the world that I'm in, analyze the world in which it can change and how I can influence it, and then also put my position in the world and how I can have agency over that. I think, yeah, those three would probably be my go-to, but there's so many others I could have picked.
David Chen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in making data accessible. And also for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Nice, beautiful.
Inspired.
Yeah, let's thank you a lot, bro.
Yeah.
Real pleasure.